Educational Advocates College Consulting. And we are so excited to have our 3 high school graduate panelists here who really, have been through the journey, and they have learned so much about applying to college and higher education. And they're here to answer questions and give advice to the group. So, and I'm going to let Ildi, my colleague, introduce herself.
Yes, hi everyone, I'm Ildi Sekay. I'm one of the consultants, and I'm super excited about this webinar. I think it's going to be very informative, and we have some incredibly talented young adults here with us today.
So we're going to probably go about 30 minutes with us asking questions of our 3 student panelists. And then, but as we go, the chat is open, so feel free to put questions in the chat. And then, after we end our formal program, we can take questions from the chat from the audience. So, so with that, we have Max, Marco, and Raya, and I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves. They're going to tell us, where they graduated from high school, where they're heading next year. And if they want, they can add another factor of their choice. Maybe they want to talk about whether entering college undecided, or whether they already think they know what their major will going to be. So why don't we start with Max?
Hi, I'm Max. I just graduated from Boston Latin School, and I'm going to be starting at Brown University in the fall, and I am accepted as a computer science and sociology major.
Okay, so I'll go. My name is Marco. I graduated from Brookline High School, and I'm headed to Notre Dame. And I'm kind of undecided. I got into the business school as a finance major, but we'll see where that takes me.
My name's Raya. I also just graduated from Brookline High. I'm headed to UMiami. I got into their School of Communications, and I'm probably going journalism, but I'm still a bit undecided on majors yet, so we'll see.
Great. So I think it might be really interesting for the high school students to hear a little bit about the kinds of extracurricular activities that you were involved with in high school. And I know you were involved in quite a lot. So maybe, tell us like a couple of the most meaningful activities you were involved with. And why don't we start with Raya this time?
Okay. So I'd say my 3 most meaningful were like, I was on the paper. So I ended up being an editor like my final year, but I started off sophomore year and like worked my way up. And I think that was like my biggest sort of like most influential. I am going into journalism after school major, so the paper. And then I also did cheerleading, and that was great because like team sport, community, and then I was in a band. So I'd say those were my 3 like favorite of the extracurriculars.
Raya, do you want to just like take 30 seconds and talk about like the DEI work that you did, and the name change, just because that might be interesting to students, just briefly.
Yes. So if you don't know Brookline High, our school paper's name used to be called the Sagamore, which was a Native American name. And so for our senior year of high school, we had kind of been talking to a lot of Native American people. We talked to an actual Sagamore, and I think I said it, Sagamore means chief. And they sort of told us it wasn't really appropriate for you guys to continue using the name. So when I came in for my final year, I sort of like was one of this like leaders, because my job was DEI editor, which is diversity, equity, inclusion. So I was one of the people that helped us like transition and sort of change our name from the Sagamore to the Cypress. And that was a really big undertaking that when I joined the paper, I wasn't like expecting that was going to be sort of my end goal and all the stuff that I ended up working on. But it was really helpful, and it was a really good experience, and definitely a lot of teamwork, problem solving, stuff that happened there, but very unique.
Great,
That's
thank you.
Story.
Thanks, Raya. Marco, how about you?
Yeah, I would say the 3 biggest things for me, definitely soccer. I was a big soccer player, and that took up a lot of my time. Then I also did Kane's data science boot camp. So it's this Harvard professor who held like a free data science boot camp where he taught us RStudio, a coding language. It was like a 2-week really intensive course made to simulate like the first quarter of his course at Harvard. And yeah, I think that was probably very influential in in my college application just because it showed initiative and it was something outside of school. And then another thing I did was an internship at the Broad Institute of Technology, where I did some coding for data encoded library screening, which I can't tell you much about that. I forgot a lot, not a science guy, but again, that also I think showed initiative, and it was kind of some real world experience.
That's great. And wasn't your soccer team, weren't you like 2 years ago, the state champions?
Yeah, we were the state finalists 2 years ago, and we made it to like 33rd in the country or something.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
It
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
competitive.
That's
Lots of
pretty
fun.
amazing. That's great. And Max, why don't you
Yeah.
tell us?
So I think at least like for two of my activities that were the most meaningful were like two fellowships that I did through Boston Latin. They were both like centered around social justice. And the first one I did in my like summer after my junior year. And that was working at a youth-led organization in Dorchester. And I got to do a lot of like on the ground, like hands-on work, campaigning for the Fair Share Amendment. And I had like a lot of fun doing that. And the program that I did like through BLS was like super intensive because there was a trip to New York, a part of it, which like I really enjoyed. For the Topol Fellowship, it was like a lot of the same people from the other one. Like the Topol is the second fellowship that I did, and the CVAC was the first one. So for the Topol one, it was like a lot of the same people as CVAC, and we kind of got to continue like doing social justice work around the school community. And for like a third activity, I think I really loved like my club that I was a president of, where we got to like teach younger students like different things about science. Like one week we would do coding or like engineering or like different things every week, and it was just like a nice place for like older students to hang out with younger kids and like give advice.
Wow, you three did some incredible things in high school. It sounded really fun and really, really exciting. So it'll be interesting to see what you do next 4 years. So my last question, then I'm going to let Ildi ask some. So I was just wondering if you could each say like, what were the like 2 or 3 like most important factors in your college search? Like what was the most important part of your criteria? And, Marco, why don't you start?
Yeah, so going into the college search process, I wasn't very picky at all, and I was kind of just, in my ideal world, I'd just be placed somewhere kind of like high school and just deal with it, I guess. So it was kind of hard to make choices, but eventually, Laurel, who I worked with, did a really good job of presenting me with options, and eventually, I also started to look for my own. Main things I looked for were flexibility in curriculum, just because I'm super undecided, not sure what I want to do. Flexibility in curriculum, as well as like strong level of rigor across all different subjects, just because I don't know where I would end up. And then the third thing is just social fit, and I think that kind of ties a bunch of things together. So where it is, and especially with Notre Dame, when I visited the school and I went to some info sessions, I really got a strong sense of community, and that really helped seal the deal.
That's great. Were you looking at Catholic schools, or did you just happen to really like Notre Dame?
Yeah, so I wasn't specifically looking at Catholic schools, and actually I wasn't really familiar with I guess religious affiliated schools. But I did visit Notre Dame, and again, that info session that I went to was also really helpful. I'm Catholic myself, and it's a big part of my life. So I think aside from the 3 things I mentioned, that again was a huge deal.
Okay, great. Max, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important factor for me is like what Marco just talked about, and that was like community for me. That was like a huge piece of it, and like part of that was like looking for like a smaller size school. I knew that I didn't really want to go to like one of those like big universities like UMich or like UMass that's like 30,000 kids. I just like knew that wouldn't be the place for me. So I was looking at a lot of like smaller liberal arts schools. And I like also was definitely looking for a place that like would be supportive in that way, and like that like definitely ties into community too. Um, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the other two that I just
Oh,
had.
that's okay. What you just said was great. That's great. Raya, how about you?
I think I was picky, but I did not know what I wanted until like a little bit into the process. Joan knows because Joan was my go-to. But at the beginning, I was like, I'm gonna go small. And then there was I think one of the big things for me was I wanted to be in a city. But I did want a campus, which is kind of hard to find, like city with a campus. So I'm happy where I'm at because I'm at a city with a campus, but that was a bit difficult. And community was also really important to me. So having a campus was important for the community aspects. And then also for my major, I didn't know, like, I'm still not set on journalism, but I have like three main areas, like journalism, film, and like psychology, where like all the three different things that I've been like looking at. And so when I looked at schools, I just kind of confirmed, do they have all these three things? Are they strong here? Like good for academics aspect. But mainly I was just looking about like social fit and also like atmosphere.
Great.
Excellent.
Ildi, you want to take it away with the college list?
Yeah, oh, actually, I have a quick question before we go there, because I want to
Okay.
piggyback on what Max was talking about, working with younger students and advisors. So I want to piggyback on that, and looking back through this process, what would be the advice you would give to your younger self as you start out the college, applying to colleges? Like right now, you're sitting right now, you're looking back, let's say a year ago, like what advice would you give yourself? Max, do you want to start since I picked on you?
Yeah, I can start. I think like hitting, like making deadlines to yourself and for yourself and like sticking to them is really important. Like, I know Ildi, there were a few times where I'd be like, oh, like I'll get to that in like a few days, or like give me another few days for that. Which didn't happen a ton, but like keeping to like deadlines and like that you set for yourself and like staying organized, I think is really important, because like it takes a load off you in terms of like not like rushing to the end or anything like that. And it also like gives whoever you're working with, like whether it's like Ildi, Joan, or like somebody else at Education Advocates, like enough time to like look at things, and then that will give you a breath of like, that things are more polished and like whatever, whether that's like applications or like your personal statement or whatever.
That's great. Marco, do you want to pick up?
Yeah, I would say to really prioritize research. I think that last year, I kind of looked at schools at a surface level. And then after I applied to them, I kind of really got into the nitty gritty, especially when I was getting acceptances and denials back. Luckily, I made good choices, but I think if I were to go back a year ago, I would tell myself to really delve into like the curriculum, the professors, specifics of like dorm life. So.
Oh, Marco, thank you for saying that, because we're always trying to get students to take the research.
And it's a lot of work
seriously.
too. So.
Thank you.
I think what advice I would give myself a year ago, I was totally stressed. And I think like to the point, there's no reason to be that stressed, as I feel like I was acting like a nut, and my general demeanor in most things is like, be relaxed, be normal. And like, that's like not how I was behaving. And ultimately, you should have a certain amount of stress, like get your work done, like follow your deadlines. But I felt like it was detrimental, because if I was like later in the process, like I'd say summer into senior year, beginning of senior year, I managed to like be productive with my stress, and I was like researching and doing good, helpful things. But there was a point where I felt like I was so stressed I was getting nothing done, which is not helpful. And there's a certain amount you can control, like whatever happens will happen, not to be all like annoying, but I would say work on your stress level. That's what my advice would be to myself in junior year.
Excellent. Since you mentioning the stress level, like, and I'm maybe jumping ahead with the question, but what did you guys do to eliminate that stress? Like, did you have any strategies to handle the stress? And when you got to the time crunch, what were some of your outlets that you give, maybe an advice to your younger audiences here?
I mean,
Marco, go ahead.
sorry. I guess I don't have as much of an outlet, but more of like a philosophy around it's not really the decision you make, but what you make of the decision. That's something my mom and I spoke a lot about. You can really end up anywhere as long as you really put your heart and soul into it. Yeah, things will work out.
I love that. That's great.
That's great. Yeah, I love it too.
Raya?
Yeah, I think that was where I ended up too. I was sort of like, I know what I kind of want and what I want to achieve and what I want to make of my college experience. And no matter where I can end up, like I can do all those things. And that made me feel like significantly better stress wise. And I also felt like when I had something to do with that stress, like when I was like, I'm going to get this supplemental done by this week, and then I got it done by that week and I checked it off my list, there's something very satisfying about that. So like getting stuff done when you say you're going to get it done and sort of staying organized, and I'm not a naturally organized person, but staying organized like that is very helpful because it's sort of like it makes you feel better.
Well, Ryan, you had the big master schedule that we kind of outlined, and you were pretty good about sticking with it. And then, if something came up, you were really good about saying like, oh, I'm going to get it this day instead. So did that help you having that schedule?
It did. It helped a
Okay.
lot.
Good,
So.
good.
Max?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really important to me is like spending time with like your loved ones, like whether that's like your family members or just like your friends. That can always be a great outlet because those people will like support you like throughout the entire college process, whether that's like being stressed, writing supplements, or like when decision days come. And I think like also a piece of advice I have like about outlets and stuff is like what I did that like I kind of regret or like wish I didn't was like going online and like looking at stuff about like, oh, like will this get you in, or like what's going to get me into this school or whatever. And like Ildy knows I spent a lot of time like stressing about that. But I like if you can just try to stay away from that. Like I got on TikTok a lot about like, oh, like these are the things to include in your application, and like if you don't have this, then like you're not going to get in anywhere. Like you're gonna get in like where you're gonna get in, and like kind of going back to what Marco was saying, like you're gonna like make the best of your decision, and like you're gonna end up fine no matter where you go.
To piggyback off of that, don't look at those like I know they're heartwarming, those like happy I got into XYZ school videos that are all over TikTok, but I did not want to be seeing them every 5 seconds. And I felt like an internal turmoil. I was like, I'm happy for you, but when will this be me? So I would say avoid social media as well.
I would also say don't record those videos because I think that it would be good if those were in the past, because I think they are stressful. In the as you said, Max, the social media, they're often inaccurate, the kinds of advice people are giving. So you want to always make sure that you're getting the right information. So great advice, all of you. That's excellent.
Yeah, you want me to ask the college this question, or do you want
Yeah, go ahead.
And so you guys mentioning some really great advice. And then I think Marco mentioned that we should put a lot more effort in the research early on. So my question to you guys is, what was the most helpful thing you learned about the colleges on your list? Like maybe tools you used, or maybe, like things you didn't know going into the research process. Raya, you want to start this?
Sure. What was the most helpful things going into my college list? I felt like my list was super, like personally was broad. Like I felt like all the different schools that I was picking from, like offered something different for me. That way, when like sort of decision time came, I wouldn't really feel like I was stuck, or I wish I had looked more at bigger and smaller. And like that personally for me was very helpful because that range, like at the end, was just very nice. And are you asking like what criteria I was looking at for my college
No,
list?
like what was the most helpful thing you did to learn about the colleges on your list?
I deep dived on the websites. That was helpful. I felt like I got sort of an element of what each school was like. And then for some of my top schools, I like visited them. So UMiami I visited, and that was really, really nice because it eased some of my worries. And yeah, I would just say like research the school through its website, and you can sort of look on those like actual like students that go there. There are all those pages where they will like answer questions about what their school's atmosphere is like and stuff like that, and like those types of things are helpful.
So like College Niche and Unigo, the review sites, is that what you mean?
Yeah, yes, those are the names that I'm looking for.
Yeah, okay, good.
Max?
Yeah. I think like during the research process, that's like incredibly important, and take it seriously. And like I know at a few different points I was like, why am I doing this? Like I kind of want to be doing other things right now, because I was also like working that summer. But it is very important, and like even if you're not applying to that school, then you can like get useful information like, no, I don't like this thing about like a school, or like I don't want this in my curriculum, and then that can help you like make eliminations in terms of a college list. I was also very broad in the beginning, and like I kind of rejected some of Ildy's like suggestions, and then I went back and I was like, oh, I really like that school actually. So like just know your college list is definitely going to change and it's going to evolve, and like that's totally okay. You don't need to like stick to anything at all. And like also what Raya said about like visiting, that's really important. And like at least for me, like when I visited Brown, like I immediately fell in love with the campus and everything, and I knew that it would be the place for me. So yeah, if you can like get to visit, like definitely do.
Marco?
Yeah, similar to Raya, I had a broad list, and a lot of the colleges on my list offered a lot of different things. So, you know, I'm interested in engineering as well as other things. So like one school might specialize in engineering, whereas another might like be an option playing soccer there, something like that. And I think what I did to choose those different schools is really just go on the website, find what they specialize in. I guess in case of soccer, look at division, stuff like that. And eventually it doesn't seem like the best strategy, because you can't get like all of those specifications in one, but at the end you kind of find a sweet spot and you choose the school that has the most to offer that it fits you.
Excellent. Joan,
Awesome.
would you like to take over, ask a couple of questions?
Sure. You know, Max, you kind of already addressed this, but I was wondering, you know, maybe you all did. Do you have anything more to say about how your college list changed from the beginning of junior year to the time you applied? Maybe you all, do you feel like you all already covered that? Anything else to say?
Right. Well, can I add on one more thing about like useful research things?
Yes, please.
This is like really specific, but on College Planner Pro, like the FIS guide, I found really helpful to actually read through, because it gave me like a good vibe of the school. So definitely check that out if you haven't already, or if your like consultant hasn't already told you about it. But as for like, sorry, can you repeat your question, Joan, about like how like
Yeah, like how did your list change from the beginning of junior year when you got started to the time you applied?
Yeah. I mean, I came into Educational Advocates later, like in the spring of my junior year. So like initially I felt some stress about like not having a jump on the process and kind of like coming into it late, but like I ended up being completely fine. And with like in terms of research and everything, like I started with like big and small schools, and then like as I went through the process, like I was initially like really nervous to like eliminate a school or like say I didn't like something, because like I was worried like, oh, what if I change my mind or not? But like I think it did end up like evolving. Like I eliminated like bigger schools, and I ended up like really liking smaller schools and stuff. So like that's how it changed for me.
Great. What about the campus visits have come up a bit, but we didn't delve into them. So I'd be interested to hear like what aspects of the campus visits did you find helpful? And maybe there were some that you didn't find helpful. So any advice to the audience about campus visits?
I think it's definitely good to kind of get a sense of the campus and the surrounding area. In terms of like specifics about the school itself, I found that a lot of they're trying to sell something to you, so I don't think you're going to get a super honest review of the school. I think it's best to do research on your own. With that said, I think that campus visits are really important. It's good to see what campus life is like and what the area is like. So.
Great.
For me, it was helpful because sort of one big quality, like one big thing I was looking for was I wanted to see what the social scene would be like and what the atmosphere would be like. And it was really interesting because I felt like when I first started the process, I could not figure out whether or not to eliminate school. Then I went on some visits and it was really helpful because I was like, okay, this type of school I'm not really a fan of. And this, I love this element of this, but I don't like this. Like it helped you narrow a lot of things down. Sorry, that's not very eloquent. But for me, that was really helpful. For Miami, I was nervous about some elements of like the social scene and this, that, and the other. And then I went there and I was like, wow, you find every type of person here. It's way more normal than I was expecting. And I liked seeing kids from the architecture school and the Frost school. And like, it was just really nice for me to actually get to be there and sort of like see what being at the school would really be like. Versus I went to visited a different school and I was like, oh my God, I hate this. And so that was helpful too, though, because then I was like, okay, I'm not going to look for that. Because sometimes you're not able to get like the full picture of what actually being there on the school is like through the research. So it's just a helpful thing.
Max, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, like definitely try and go like I know like your consultant will tell you this, and like I kind of ignored this just because it worked better for my schedule, but like definitely go when school is in session. Like I went the summer of my junior year and like there wasn't really anybody on campus, and I kind of like wish that there was, because when I went for admitted students day, when I was like still deciding about where I wanted to go to school, it was super helpful to talk to students. And like even if you just sit down in the dining hall, like people tend to be pretty friendly and they'll like actually answer your questions and like tend to be pretty interested in you, and like they're not mean. So like if you have questions about a school, it's like great to ask students who actually go there.
Max, I'm so glad you brought that up, because one of the things we advise students when they visit, and sometimes students feel shy about it, but like to go in the cafeteria, and if you see like two students just chatting with each other, to kind of edge over and say, introduce yourself and say, do you have a minute to answer a couple of questions? I'm a junior visiting, and I'm thinking of applying here. And they love to talk about their school. And we always joke and say, like, don't ask the kid with the headphones typing, because they're probably trying to get their paper done. But, you should really do it, because it's a great way. I mean, you're not going to learn about a whole school from talking to two students, but it gives you a little flavor. So, let's shift over to essays. So what advice do you have for the rising seniors who are, starting their essays? And let's start with Raya this time.
Okay. My advice for rising seniors starting their essays. I would say I felt like going into the process, I read a lot of example essays online. And that was helpful to a certain degree because I felt like writing it, I got to like a portion when I was supposed to like sit down and write it where I was thinking about all these sample essays and what other people did. And I felt like my very first sort of draft I scratched because I felt like it wasn't authentic because it mimicked other people's writings and sort of what I felt like I was supposed to like get out of my essay. So I would say don't read a bunch of examples right before you sit down to write your essay. We do the whole brainstorming process. So like I remember very clearly coming up with a bunch of ideas and going that way. And for my essay, I actually ended up writing two like main essays. And I know that sounds crazy, but it was so helpful for me because I could not choose like which one of these two is my story, like what is me as a person. So I just was like, I'm writing them both. And Joan was like, okay. And then
it was fine.
and it was fine because one of them I basically like used for all my supplementals. And then the other one was my main essay. And that worked out for me. And it was a good way for me to like get both stories. But I would say when it comes down to like actually writing it, like, give yourself time, like make a hot cup of tea and just like write something. And then you'll feel better because you'll have something to edit.
So poor Raya had to go to the internet to find essays, because we actually purposely don't share students' essays because of what Raya just said, is that sometimes you feel like you have to write and it's not your voice and it paralyzes students. We know students might look them up, but once in a while we might read an excerpt for an essay if we're trying to teach like a writing device to a student, but we don't give essays for that reason. So Max, what about you?
Yeah, think like with the writing process, like what I got stuck with most was like like I wrote my first draft and like I really liked that idea, and then I didn't want to deviate from it a lot, and like LD definitely like pushed me a lot to like try and like get away from like, because like my problem, like I wrote my essay about my grandfather, and like my problem was I like kept writing about him and I wasn't really writing about myself. So like make sure that your statement definitely like centers around you and not somebody else. But also like another piece of advice with like writing like anything that you're writing, like supplements, or if you're writing your personal statement, like save all of your drafts and everything, because like Raya said, like you will end up using it for other things. If it's not supplements, like I've used it for scholarship applications and like a number of other things. So like save all of that writing, because it can like end up being really useful later.
And save a copy of your common application too, because you might want to go back and use some of your activities descriptions for a resume and that sort of thing. So if you three haven't downloaded it, make sure you do. Marco, what about you?
Yeah, I would say two things. One, just be prepared to delete a lot. I wrote a lot and I had to cut off a lot of the essay, which kind of sucked, but ultimately it was good. I'm really happy with the essay, but be prepared for that. Don't get too attached to anything. And then second piece of evidence, or the second piece of advice, I think it's important to try and think about something that you can write about, which will be unique and that not a lot of other people are going to write about. So I think it's good to sort of contemplate that before you rush into things.
Excellent. Good.
So one thing that we consultants struggle with, so my next question is, maybe you guys can help us out. From your experience, when do you recommend students begin working on their essays? Marco, you want to start? Yeah,
I would say probably over the summer, definitely like at least halfway through the summer, just to give yourself a good chunk of time to get like the most of the work out of the way, because once school starts, it's going to become really hard. The earlier, the better, to be honest. But I would say like the latest you want to start is probably midway through the summer, just because you're also going to have to write a bunch of supplementals, and those are really going to get in the way too.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did the same. I was basically done with my main essay when school started. And that was hugely helpful because I wasn't like racking my brain for like, who am I as a person, as I was trying to like get good grades in my classes. I was working on like supplemental stuff, but I had started a good majority of that over the summer, and it felt for me unrealistic to like became like I just didn't think I was going to be like completely done with all my supplementals by the time I came in to the very beginning, but I had a good chunk of them done, and that was nice. But definitely I would recommend try to get done with your main essay over the summer, because that's when you're going to have the most time to really be thinking about those sorts of questions.
So the seniors in the audience, as a reminder, that is the goal, is everybody should be finished with their Common App essay and their Common App main part, not the supplementals, before school starts. So that's the goal that everybody has. And I think you all did that last year, as I recall. So yeah. Max, what about you?
Yeah, sorry.
So, sorry, I forget who's asking questions.
I didn't exactly meet that deadline. I think it was like more like early October that I finally finished my personal statement. But like definitely like start it at like when like, or you guys are all, this is for juniors now, like rising seniors. So like if you guys are done with your junior year, like start it as soon as you can. Like the earlier the better, like everyone else has been saying, because I think what I was waiting for is like a stroke of genius or something. And like if you just like sit down and write, that's a lot better than like waiting for like some like epiphany to come. Because if you have something to work with, then that's like a lot better than like, oh, like I might like write something like great like later. Like just work with what you have, I guess.
And Max, early October made sense for you because you, as you said, you didn't start the process till you didn't come in till spring of junior year. So you were kind of doing, a lot of college list work. So you kind of couldn't really start the essay quite as quickly. So that was actually a good time frame for given all you had to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing about essay ideas, I felt like I was struggling with the sort of like uniqueness aspect of my essay. And it sort of helped me a lot in thinking that people are gonna, on some level, people are gonna have like similar coming of age like stories to say. And what made me feel better is like I can make it unique by my own personality. It doesn't have to be the most like insane experience on like planet Earth to be my essay. And that sort of was helpful for me, and sort of like starting to thinking about like you can make it unique based off of like you yourself as a person, which like I don't know if that sounds so different, but like you don't necessarily have to have the craziest story ever to have a unique essay. Like that helped me a lot.
Can I read something that I think is interesting? So this is an excerpt from a book. It's oh God, am I gonna forget the name of the book? It's J.R. Moringer. It's The Tender Bar is the book, and it was a movie. And he writes a chapter, about writing his college essay and how he kept trying to like write these essays with these vocabulary words that he never really used, and neither does anyone else. And his mother would give it back to him and be like, "This is rotten." And say like, "You better go back and start again." So let me just read you. This is pretty funny. So he says, to spite his mother, I went back into my bedroom and batted out a slapdash essay with not one big word, just a plain and simple description of working at the bookstore with Bill and Bud, how they taught me to read by giving me bagfuls of books and talking with me patiently about literature and language. I wrote about how they transmitted their enthusiasm for books and how I saw Yale as an enlargement of this experience. Dull as yesterday's dishwater, I thrust it at my mother. Perfect, she said. I was never so confused. So to go to Raya's point, the best essays are so it's often about just like everyday moments. They're not about any big fancy thing. So keep that in mind.
So just to be conscious of the time, I want to have one question for you guys. And then I know this is weighing on a lot of students' mind. And what do you see as pros and cons of early decision? And by any means, don't feel like you have to share or tell us whether you applied early decision and anywhere or what the decision was. But looking back through the process, do you have any recommendation, pros and cons about applying early? I leave this to whoever wants to start or chime in.
So I would say that early decision for me, I felt like was this big, like I wanted to ED somewhere, like I did ED somewhere, and it was sort of like, oh my God, where am I going to ED? Like, where do I want to go for a certain 100%? Which school am I going to have the best chance at? And I think from like a strategic standpoint, like if you want to give yourself the best shot at a school, I think you should ED. Like I truly do. But I think it can be sort of like a lot of like pressure to put on yourself during that process to also be thinking about like, this is my number one perfect school. And then if you don't get in there, you're like, oh my God, like I just put all my hopes on this ED school. So I would just, with everything, I would try to be like I just like, remember how Marco said earlier, like about how he and his mom talked about how it's not about which school you end up at, it's what you make of it. Like that's what you have to think about the ED process. And that is when I came to my realization of that was during that process. And that helped me a lot because then no matter what happens with the ED thing, it's what you make of the school. But I would recommend if you want to give yourself like the best shot at one school strategically to ED there.
Marco, do you
Anyone else? Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Raya said. That if you do you have your heart set on one school, I would ED. I didn't ED anywhere just because I didn't really have a clear first choice. The other thing is like with early action, I really wanted to early action to all of my schools. So that's non-binding, but you get the application in early and you get the decision back early. I think it's important to be careful with that and to consult your advisor. So with your advisor, just because some schools have higher or lower early action acceptance rates. So I think that's important to keep in mind. Yeah, that's my advice.
Yeah, I was gonna touch on that too, and like I completely agree with like what both of you guys said. Like with like I ED'd to Brown and then I got deferred. So like kind of like Raya was saying, like I really got down on myself like about that, and like I was really disappointed because like I was so excited about like going to Brown, and that was like the one thing for me, and then when that didn't happen, like I was really disappointed. So like definitely try and stay level-headed about it, like however like hard that like can be extremely hard to do. but also like with like the ED and EA stuff, like I know that for like there you'll be told a bunch of different things about like, oh, like ED is like higher acceptance, but like it's a harder applicant pool and stuff. Like there's like so many different things like going around about it. So like definitely talk to your consultant about like what might be the best option for you. Because like anything with college admissions, like it's all just such a toss up. There's like no exact science to anything about it.
Was also deferred from where I ED'd. And during that time period, it was really hard too, because a lot of people were like, it would like, social media, I am a fan, but I'm not a fan, because I opened it up and it'd be like, congrats, X. And I was like, I'm happy for you, I guess. So I would just like, not most people, I don't know if most people, I don't know what the stats are, but not everybody's going to get in where they're ED. Like I was deferred, like lots of people were. And I would just say, manage your stress level.
Yeah, I would say, and just keeping a level head throughout the whole like acceptance stage. Kids are gonna get in places, are gonna get rejected. And I think, privacy is probably the best thing to practice during that stage. But if you have a friend or two, it's good to share things.
I love that you just brought up privacy, Marco, because that's something we advise. Like if you tell everybody in the world that you're applying early decision to a particular school, everyone knows the day those decisions come out, and then everybody's going to ask you. So, it's sometimes it is better to just keep it close to your vest, not in a weird way. As you said, you probably have a couple of close friends you share, but you don't have to tell everybody you have a right to your own privacy through this process. And it's important to remember that.
Yeah, then it's just really awkward. Then if people
Yeah.
are like waiting to hear from you about XYZ school. I also went the privacy route, told my couple friends. That's it.
Good for you. So I want to invite the audience to put any questions in the chat that they would like to put in. And while you're doing that, we can continue to ask a couple more questions before we wrap up. So I believe the chat is enabled, I hope that people can put something in there. So feel free to do that. And while we're waiting, let's see, what do we want to add? Did any of you think about a gap year? Raya?
I did. I ended up not, I felt like a whole year was too much time for me, and that's sort of why I didn't go for it. But I am doing my first semester abroad, which for me I like as this sort of hybrid, even though it's still obviously school, but it's a little bit different. Just because when I was thinking about taking a gap year, I was really thinking about I want to break, like I want to explore some of my like interests, like career wise. But yeah, ultimately I sort of decided that a year was too much time.
You want to tell everyone where you're going for your fall term?
Yes, I'm going to be in Dublin, Ireland for my first semester. So I'm excited about that.
So fun. That's going to be really fun. I'm worried that we're not getting questions, so that makes me worried. That is the chat on? Somebody in the audience just like type something in? Oh, it's on, Laurel. Yes, Laurel, you're here. Thank you. Okay.
Laurel?
So we'll ask a couple of more questions.
Well, we have parents listening as well. So what would be, like your advice to parents? How can parents be helpful to students through this process?
I think the main thing, my mom really let me drive the process. That was a big thing. I think in that way, you sort of learn a lesson through doing it your own way. And it might not be the easiest way to do it, but there's improvement that comes from that in taking initiative on things and organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Raya or Max, either of you want to chime in on this?
I would say like my junior year, I didn't really know what I wanted. So my parents were like, we're going to get involved. And that was for me, like, I know they have good intentions. People here know my parents love them, but it actually, I felt like it added more sort of pressure because they'd ask me all these questions and I was like, I don't know what I want to do. Like, I don't know this, that, and the other. And so I obviously like, now I know what I want to do. And by the time I got to like end of junior year, somewhere into senior year, I had all my goals set and I was sort of leading it. And when I was able to lead it, great. Because then they were helpful because like my mom is normally the most stressed person in our family. And when she sort of saw me being stressed, it was almost like we switched roles, and that was helpful because then she was just like, supportive and helped me work on deadlines. And it wasn't like her telling me what to do about XYZ. When it was me like leading it, like Marco said, it was just much better. And it's much easier. I know it's hard sometimes as a parent to step back and just step back, but that was much better because I would much rather like have a supportive person in the background.
Great advice.
That was my experience.
Yeah. My moms were like very like hands off with it in terms of like letting me drive the process, which I really appreciated. So my advice to parents is like definitely do that and like let the person like who's going to school choose where they're going, and like make sure they feel like they have all the like decision-making power in the process.
Excellent.
I think we're not getting any questions because you guys are amazing and answering
You-
every
Yeah,
question.
yeah. I
Um,
just want to thank all of you so much. What an amazing presentation. I feel like I know you have all kinds of career plans, but if you wanted to be college admissions consultants, you would probably be really good because you've learned quite a lot. But this was so, I think that this was so helpful to the audience and to students who are watching. And thank you so much for your time. We're gonna miss you too. We're not gonna get to see you as much, but we're gonna check in with you next year when you're at college, and you'll get to fill us in on all the wonderful things that you're doing. Oh, we have a question here. Laurel asked, how did you make your decision? I know it was a tough one for Marco. So why don't we, that might be a good way to end. So why don't you each, if you still have the energy, answer that for us.
Yeah, so it came down for me between Notre Dame and the University of Michigan. I visited both schools, and I really, really liked the University of Michigan. And then the next day I went from Michigan to Indiana. I did it in one trip. And so I already like Michigan was high on my list, probably the top of my list at the time. So Notre Dame was fighting an uphill battle. And I went there, and it was kind of at the end of it, they were toe to toe. And I think it came down to research. I think again that's the main thing. So I guess I felt the atmosphere at the campus, and I got a good sense of the vibe, I guess. So then I dove into research, and I saw that Notre Dame had the more flexible curriculum, whereas Michigan, being a state school, would have kind of locked me into one path. And then also Notre Dame being Catholic was a great fit for me. So yeah, the research was great. That was the main thing.
Excellent answer. Thank you.
For me, it came down to two schools in the end, and I visited them both like after I got in. The first one I visited, I've definitely like the first school I visited was not the school I ended up at, and it felt to me sort of like more comfortable. Like Miami for me was like pushing myself, going someplace far, like doing all these different things, and socially I was a little bit more like nervous about Miami. And so then when it came down to like my final decision, I got on a call with Joan. And Joan, I think you remember this, but I joined the call wearing like a Miami shirt and Miami sweatpants that I had just bought the day before, which really was like a subconscious decision on my part. And Joan would be like, so like, Ryan, what are you thinking? I would go into like a long tangent about this, that, and the other. And then my dad in the background was like, she's wearing a Miami shirt and sweatpants right now. So I had made my decision. I just didn't want to like be sort of go out there and say like I'm going to U Miami. Like for me, that was like a decision itself. Like that felt like scary for me to just say and like be done with. But yeah, I think it was the right fit for me. It was in a city, it had a campus, and then academically, just for what I want to do, it was really great at all three specific things that I want to do. So that was another plus. And when I visited it, I like it socially, and I was happy about it, excited. It felt like a new adventure chapter for me, which was what I was looking for. So that's how I made my decision.
Excellent.
Max, you had a little bit of a waiver there at the end.
I did have a waiver there at the end. It was also kind of a tough one for me. I was deciding between Brown and Harvard. And I felt like I said that I ED'd to Brown, and then I got deferred. And I was like really shocked to get in regular because like I thought that would be like a death sentence, like so to say, for me. And I like thought that like ended all of my chances of about getting into Brown. And then when I also got into Harvard and I was like deciding between the two, I was really conflicted because I loved Brown so much. But then I think Ilda, you were the one to say that it was like the Harvard itch that like everyone gets. And that was like kind of distracting me in my decision. But like when it came down to it, like for me at least, it was that Brown was like I knew would be the better place for me. I would have a better college experience there, and like it would just like do a lot more for me in terms of like personal connections and community and everything like that. And I just felt like Harvard, the only selling point was like that it is Harvard and like the name recognition and all those things. Like I felt like in every other aspect, Brown was better for me. So
Great. Is there, before we wrap up, is there anything else any of you would like to say? You've said it all. You've done an amazing job. Thank you so much. And have a wonderful summer and all these great vacations you have coming up. And I mean it, we are going to miss you. So you're great kids, and it's going to be exciting to see all the interesting things you do. So you got to keep in touch. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. And we're getting, just so everyone sees, that we're getting a lot of thank yous from parents in the audience, and they're saying how helpful it was and how impressive you three are, which we already know. So thanks again. And we'll see you soon. Good night, everybody.
So much. It was a wonderful presentation.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.